We can turn them on.
Okay. We just got done with close. Can we have a motion to go back into open?
So moved.
Ms. McGee, second.
Second.
Ms. Bucieri, all in favor? Aye. We'll move to item F, presentations, new intervention program at Glen Meadow. Are you guys using this or no?
Yes.
Yep. Actually.
We're also presenting our park results last year as well.
I didn't put it in the.
I thought you were going, first of all, I could have gone off of there. So. Yeah, they wobble.
Okay, you ready?
We're live streaming now?
We are. Fellas, just so you know, the camera is.
Yeah, don't stand in front of the camera. You guys had 2 hours to get this ready.
Straight to the
What's that?
point. You're very forward.
You guys had 2 hours.
Literally.
I'm presenting these results much like I did the previous years as far as our average scores and our percent passing compared to previous years. And then at the end I'll do a little comparison of our school to the other school like I did last year. The thing is, those reports and results won't come out until the report cards are published, which is later in the year. But I'll give you a little snapshot of what I gave you last year, and we'll be giving reports like that the year following.
Folks, you have a printout in your packet, so if you want to go to that, you'll have it.
Just this.
Yep.
Yes. And also, they have the average SAT scores as well. So here's the presentation. So I'm pretty straightforward in how I present the results year to year. There's our third grade mathematics and ELA scores over the last 4 years. And they're all pretty much in the same ballpark. And we've had a lot of change in third grade, moving both buildings into the same building last year. So negligible changes there, negligible differences between years as far as the average scores. We go to the Glen Meadow scores, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and those are where we saw our biggest gains, and that's where we spend most of our time and energy with the program. We went to a little bit of a different schedule with the students and different special ed program as well. You'll see some pretty high jumps here in the 7th and 8th grades, with the math scores and the ELA scores as well.
The intervention program went in place in January and February, the first part of the intervention.
And there's the lounge grade hall, which was after. And again, those scores are about the same as they were the previous years. And like I said, when we go to compare them to other schools in the district, that's when we get a better idea how we're doing compared to schools close by. So those are the average scores. Here are the results in the high school. And I'll be honest with you, the one we're most concerned with, as you read in the paper, is the algebra scores are the ones that are going to be the ones that can't account for graduation. But I think eventually the geometry and algebra 2 will be phased out. From year to year, compared to the whole county, we've gotten phenomenal ELA grades, ELA scores at the high school. If you look at our averages, especially when you see in a later slide compared to other schools in the district. I believe we're the first in the county last year with our ELA scores.
Russ, I'm going to leave that there. Governor Murphy's talking about removing some of the tests, going from 6 to 2. These would be the 2 that we would lose, and this becomes a graduation requirement. So the students would need a 750 to graduate if they're going to stick with what we think we're going to do.
Right, we focused a lot of our energy on the algebra test because for freshmen last year, it's a graduation requirement that they pass that in order to graduate high school. And if not, we were going to be required to offer some remediation courses and spend a lot of extra money and time and effort in order to get them to pass that assessment.
And that would be an unfunded mandate.
So that's a state requirement that 9th graders pass Algebra 1 in order to graduate
There's been a
3
lot of
years
talk in the
later?
state with a change of governor as far as making changes to graduation requirements, or
yes.
maybe putting some other fallbacks like they had in the past as far as ASVAB tests, SATs, and tests of that nature. It hasn't happened yet. I have a slide later on in here where I have a little article where they talk about that as well.
Right,
I'm
but
waiting, right now, if you're a sophomore, you'll have to pass the Algebra 1 park in order to graduate high school, or sit for every single park assessment, and then you can go through the portfolio review process. But it looks like they've had a lot of open talks that I've been in attendance with superintendents and other school districts. It looks like they're looking to make changes, but I don't know how quick they're gonna make a lot of these changes. And I have a little article later on in one of the slides.
But as early as the HESPA, there's always been a graduation requirement tied to testing in 11th grade. The interesting thing about this process was it was something that could take as early as 9th grade, but it has become a real bellwether test about whether to remove the park or not, because they don't have a graduation requirement test if they remove the park. So this is why the talk of moving from 6 to 2, with, in my humble opinion, I think this is the one that's staying,
The algebra and the ELA 10.
an ELA 10. Yep.
Now, how concerning is that the Algebra 1, 750 is the passing score?
Yes.
That starts you into the 4 range. How
Yes.
concerning is that we're only at 750? That is our average score.
Compared to the, well, that's compared to the state and the percent passing. I also have other figures on the percent passing, which will get a better idea of, I think it's probably 46%, and that's including all students not passing the algebra. Well, if they don't change the rules, what kind of remediation programs are they providing? Are they taking a different class instead of an elective? Things of that nature. I'm hoping that they're looking to open up some of those other avenues that they had for present seniors now, where they have the SATs, they have the PSATs, and they have the ASVAB testing where they can graduate. Nothing's been officially decided, and when I get that article, I'll point out what's said in the paper and what actually it means, because everyone's, oh, we're not having the park. Well, actually, they're saying we're anticipate having it until, was it 2020, 2021, before any major changes are made as far as the park test.
And what we've noticed from states that do remove the park test, the test that they replace it with is very much like the park test.
It's Massachusetts.
Massachusetts is a prime example.
Always the best.
No,
But again, going back to the question, I understand, but 750 is the passing, so you
Yes.
said there's going to be more then? You're going to explain that as we go further on?
yes, with the percent passing,
Okay.
but it's still not. It's not an exciting number as
Well,
far
no,
as
that's
spending
what
the
I'm saying,
resources.
it's not an exciting number at all, to have 750, because that is the passing score. I'd like to see the percentages.
And in the state, I think I'll have to look at the state, somewhere in the 30% range of kids passing algebra.
Right.
What are you gonna do for the other 60-some% of students?
30% pass algebra.
In
What
In the
is,
state.
what is the maximum score?
850.
Sorry.
But 750 is a cut score, and only 36% at one point were passing the algebra
In the
in
state.
the whole state.
In the state.
Mhm.
We were up, here we go to passing percentages. It's a little bit different than the scores, but again, we're close to the New Jersey average in 3rd grade. In 4th grade, again, close to the New Jersey averages. And we spent a great deal of time and energy and curriculum in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade because of some of the results we had before. And look at the jumps we had from last year to this year. I'm really excited about percent passing, average score versus percent passing from last year to this year. When you compare them to some of the New Jersey state averages, we put a lot of time and energy in the 8th grade this year to transition to algebra for the kids the test that they have to pass. Look at the scores that we had in our Algebra 1 in 8th grade. Every kid passed, either met or exceeded expectations.
So the response that you did to like achieve these gains, is that something that can only be done for a small cohort of kids, or is this something that can be pushed into every single classroom, like an intensive, or like a style of teaching and learning math that is?
Well, that's the gradual release process that we use in our current math curriculum we have with the Math and Focus is Singapore Math. And one of the things I always tell teachers, when I go by in the classroom, I go, I want to see kids having fun learning. Because especially in these grade levels, from experience, that's where you lose the engagement. So you better have an engaging curriculum where the kids are self-motivated, they're learning on their own, and they're interested in the topics that they're learning. Instead of having a teacher in the front of the room explaining how to do everything step by step.
But then I have a question about the Algebra 1, the 808 in Vernon. Isn't that a small cohort of our advanced math students, or is that everybody? Is that the whole class?
That's for 8th grade. I had the high school one's the next one. High school one through
No, I'm talking about the Algebra 1, you have 808.
40-some students.
So that's a small cohort.
So those are your top.
From Glen Meadow.
Yeah, it's the top students.
Yes, almost 16% of the whole 8th grade.
So then,
That's your top 16.
so then
Yes.
the 100%, I just want to make sure I have this because I'm looking at the math 6th, 7th, 8th, and then the algebra. So the algebra was taken by 8th graders.
Right.
Okay, so then they did not take the mathematics 8th grade. They took
And-
the algebra 1 instead.
And I'm very excited about that too. We had all these kids taking algebra, and look at our percent passing in 8th grade. We did a great job in 8th grade. Actually.
Right, but I'm zeroing in on the Glen Meadow with the intervention program we have. So I just want to make sure I have it straight. So if the students were in Algebra 1, 8th grade, that was the top students, so 100% of them passed, which is phenomenal.
Right.
Then therefore, those students did not take the 8th grade at Glen Meadow mathematics 8th grade part, correct? Okay, so then it went 37.4% of the 8th grade class, excluding the approximately 40 students who took the Algebra 1, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And we still, with a great, compared to the New Jersey average.
Right, and I'm not disagreeing, I'd just like to make sure I have it straight, so I know what they're all taking.
Are those students who are taking Algebra 1 and the 8th grade math, are those students who did Math and Focus from the beginning? They are part of the Math and Focus cohort and have followed it all the way up?
Yes. My son is part of that cohort. They began, I believe, with, Vinny, you started, was it in 3rd grade?
Third grade.
Third grade,
So
yes.
those are the first students that have been through the process since 3rd grade. Now, they've had a curriculum. It takes teachers a couple years to master that curriculum and get familiar with it as well. Going from a teacher-centered classroom to a student-centered classroom is quite a
So could
change.
you just go back one
Yes.
sec, so I can see the middle school again? So that middle school, the 6th, 7th, 8th, and math, which one of those grades, the 6th, 7th grade, began with Math and Focus and has had that all the way through?
8th grade.
So the 8th grade. So then, talk to me about how, because I'm trying to look at the numbers between the math 8th grade, who got the Math and Focus straight through, with a passing score of 37.4 this year versus the Algebra 1 students. When were they separated, and did the Algebra 1 students use Math and Focus or a different curriculum?
The same students, they had Math and Focus all the way through 7th grade, and in 8th grade they split.
They split. So was Algebra 1 taught in Glen Meadow?
It was taught in Glen Meadow, yes.
Okay, and then what curriculum did they use? The
The s-
Algebra 1
The
students.
same as the high school, because they get high school credit for it. They use the high school Algebra 1 curriculum.
Okay, so then that was the Algebra 1, let's say college prep, 9th grade class.
Yes.
Okay,
And here it is.
at the high school.
This is the entire district. High school and 8th grade, they don't separate.
So then those 8th graders who took Algebra 1 at Glen Meadow, but their score went into the high school or into Glen Meadows? When it's the high school.
They don't split, they do the whole district for Algebra. for entire school.
So,
But we had probably,
so we're beating the state average, but is that number really skewed because we're taking our top 16% of the prior grade and putting it into that average?
well, everyone is. That's offering algebra in 8th grade.
Every district.
Well, that's offering algebra in 8th grade if they're in the same school district.
So then what did that do to our math 8th grade part score? That
Well,
brought down, because when did the students take the math 8th grade, where they didn't? The kids were in Algebra 1.
they didn't take the 8th grade part. They had a choice in 8th grade, they were either in the math 8 class or the algebra class.
Okay, so they didn't take the 8th grade, so which we clarified. So therefore, the Algebra 1 went in up towards the high school since they're not split. So did that hurt the math 8th grade?
Well,
Granted,
if you
they
see,
went up.
well, the growth, we're almost 10 points above the New Jersey State average on the 8th grade math test, and about 10 percentage points ahead of New Jersey State average passing as well. It gets tough when you compare grade to grade, because what usually happens is a percent passing from 6th grade to 7th grade to 8th grade on the state average goes down. So a lot of times when you present these scores, it looks like, oh, our kids are doing, are passing less and less as the years go on, but the test does, you know, on the state average, look at the kids passing in 8th grade compared to 7th and 6th. And some of that is because a lot of the schools in New Jersey offer the algebra.
Right, the algebra. I'm just looking back at this 6th, 7th, and 8th and wondering, we can talk later about how the math and focus ties in, because looking at those numbers, those are not cut scores. They're all below 750.
Yes, but when they get, my whole issue is when they get to Algebra 1, when they get to this Algebra 1, they need to pass that to graduate. And what are we going to do to students that, what are we going to do to the 55% that didn't pass?
Right, my brain is still, it was back on Glen Meadow, but I see how you're going for. Okay.
And like I said, this is where we put our focus and energy, because this was going to be the test for graduation requirements. I'll talk about some of the publicity as well, but look at these ELA grades. And then with ELA, the program, usually year after year after year, is the same ELA program. There's a lot of the same concepts are built from year to year. Vernon compared to the New Jersey State average. And what I gave you last year, I talked about Linkit. As soon as these results came out, the teachers had access to them and they could see how their kids did. I think it was the
For the first time ever.
first week in July.
Yes.
Boom, they had access to their kids' results. They could use it over the summer to look and see where they focus. Even teachers and guidance counselors. So instead of asking us where, you know, how are the scores, how they've been doing over the years, what kind of issues, where are they weak, what areas do I need to work on, and that's, we're using a lot of this within the intervention program that Vinny and Jess will talk about in a little bit as well. And that's instead of, and here is the article that was posted on July 11th, and everyone's, oh, we're getting rid of Park. Okay, but if you read the article, a lot of people say students won't likely see a replacement until the 2020-2021 school year. And you know, you read the fine print, may take changes, make months to win final approval from the state board. So what we did at the high school, instead of putting these intervention programs in place right now and replacing students' electives, we're waiting to see where the state comes out on this, whether they will allow the sophomores to have alternative routes to their graduation requirement instead of just the Park, where we had about 46% of the kids pass.
But it does make us nervous
Right.
that we're waiting another year on this just to see what they're doing. So we really need them to come forward and say that if we're going to not see the test in 2021, that it's no longer a high school requirement in 2020 or 2019.
Right.
That's what we're waiting.
And not only these are high school requirements, I heard you at the last board meeting talk about a lot of the real estate and the rankings of the schools. They take these scores to rank the schools, the grades of the school districts and things of that nature. So, you know, I look at things as a challenge as a math supervisor, and I think that we could rise to that challenge and meet a lot of the goals that the state has set for us. And that's why I'm a believer in a lot of the response to intervention programs that I've read about and we've researched. Okay, this is last year's. This is not on this year's data, but I remember I presented this to you where here's a comparison. But I won't get this comparison until the state report card comes out. Here's a comparison of Vernon to the other schools in ELA. We're first in the county in ELA at the high school for overall. I will give you a report on all other school districts. I didn't want to go through this again because I gave this to you before. But when the report cards come out, I will give you a ranking of the schools on passing percentages of the Park. Passing percentages of math. Here we are compared to High Point and Sparta and other SEIL schools. And again, I looked at all the different. You know, we look at where algebra was last year. Algebra, we were at 33 last year. This year, we were close to 45.8, somewhere in there. So that's where we spent a lot of our time and energy because that was going to become a graduation requirement. And more importantly, for those students that want to go to college, this is this year's SAT data. If you look at our our SAT data for kids wanting to go to college, we're third overall with our SAT averages. Look at our percent of our participation compared to some other schools. So we had 88.4% participation. We were third in the county overall SAT. I believe our SAT score was 1 point lower than Sparta's in math, and we were third highest in the ELA for SAT. Now again, this is a snapshot of data. I don't want to judge every single student or the school by numbers or scores, but also, again, we're ranked or scored based on some of these scores, and I just like to present that to you, some of the data. And this recently just came out, and this is data from the 16-17 year.
How do some districts get 100% participation?
I was just gonna ask.
I've reached out for some of those. I'm not quite sure.
That
Can't be accurate. For Lenape and High Point, they had 100% participation rate.
I was actually reached out to, was it High Point? I reached out to some of the people I know at High Point to see how they got the participation rate.
Did you talk to Seamus Campbell?
Seamus and Drellick and some other people. Lindsay's up there now too.
Like,
So before you jump on to the next section, I'm still trying to wrap my head around how, you know, Teresa was sort of explaining to me what that cut score means. So 750, if the students are being sort of like separated into sections, 750 is passing.
You meet expectations.
You meet expectations.
Meet state expectations.
For that grade level, and you are then.
I have a chart for you.
But then so that says that student demonstrates knowledge based on third grade expectations, statewide third grade expectations, fourth grade expectations, and so on. So if, like, mathematics third grade, 751, right, 52% have passed mathematics third grade, that means that 48% do not meet expectations for third grade level math.
The state expectations and the levels they set. Now New Jersey set, for graduation requirements, set meeting expectations as the graduation requirement. Several other states that adopted the PARC set the next level or approaching expectations as a passing rate. So it's a matter of what the state set as their expectations for that grade level.
So are you implying that the state expectations are not realistic?
I'm offering you a comparison of the state averages, the Vernon state averages, to give you guys a realization of where the whole state of New Jersey is and where Vernon is.
You know, I think when you look at a test of geometry or whatever that has a 24% pass rate, you know, in the state, I think, you know, obviously the state missed the boat on expectations.
Well, when you get to the high school too, the kids know what they need to graduate. So after they know that the Algebra 1 is a graduation requirement, some of them may not take some other tests as serious when you get to those grade levels.
So this is like the PARC, you know, assessment, state assessment. But when let's say you were just to look at these students' grades in their classrooms, like on the math tests administered by the teachers in the gen ed classroom throughout the year, is half the class failing the class,
No.
or half the
No.
class
No.
not passing?
They're just
No, half the state of New Jersey isn't failing either. That's the PARC.
No.
It's a pretty high level depth of knowledge critical thinking skill test. It's not your basic facts that we used to take, minimum basic skills, and
It's not a
you know,
basic skill set.
it's not HSPT test.
No.
It's critical thinking skills. Now,
But isn't this alarming to parents? I mean, you know, I don't have a child in this grade category, so I can't speak from experience, but wouldn't it be alarming if a child is, let's say, getting acceptable grades in a class all along through the year, and then in springtime takes PARC and they realize that compared to state averages, while my kid might be getting 80s and 90s and on day-to-day kind of testing, they're actually just at the median.
Yeah, but there's also
Statewide.
stuff on PARC that they haven't even been taught yet. It's very similar to the SAT, correct? And that there's theory on there that hasn't been taught to the student yet.
we've covered most of the material. It's just the depth of knowledge and the critical thinking skills that they require. You might see a question that you've covered, and it's not a simple fact. It's explaining where did this person go wrong in this question? What mistake did they make? And you're talking some pretty deep critical thinking skills on a topic that could be measured at different levels. So it is covered, but when you have half of the state passing this assessment, you're not going to have half of the state failing in their classes.
So then, what is really, if you're telling me that half the state is passing and our students aren't even getting the cut scores to pass, granted percentages went up, then what is the validity and reliability of the park in general?
That's what you're reading the article in the paper and some of the, what's happening with the park test in the future. We're waiting the results.
Right, and I understand that's the future, but what about right now? Our students are not getting cut scores, and yes, some of the percentages are eking up and whatnot, and we're gonna be learning about the intervention program. What is then what is the reliability and validity of this state test?
Well, the reliability of the test is that it is a very difficult test, and they are trying to raise the level of instruction in each of our classes, but it's only English and math. And this is something that they have basically engineered into the testing system.
And a lot of it is where they set their cut scores at. Like some states set their cut scores at 7.5. New Jersey set their cut scores at 7.
To look at the flip side of the coin, if you had 100% passing rate throughout the whole state, then you would say the test is
No, but then
validated.
if it's not, see, here's what I'm sitting here saying. If students have, like Lauren brought up the point, very good grades, and they're doing very well, let's say math or language arts, either subject, they're doing very well, they understand that there should be a correlation between the park and how they're doing in school.
And
If
that's
there's a
exactly
big-
what I just said. If you had 100% pass rate on the test, your kids aren't getting 100% in the class, so it's not valid on that
No,
side.
but
No,
that's not what
that's not what I'm
Teresa's
saying.
though.
I'm saying if you're a straight A advanced student, then you should be coming out with like, let's say,
And you could
25.
be. You
But they're
could be.
not. Then that's my concern. I'm looking at these numbers saying that that's not the case.
That's the
No,
That's
but
what
you-
these
but
statistics are
if somebody's
showing.
getting 100 in a class, they may be getting 850 on the park test. You
But-
don't know.
But I think what
You're not
saying is
breaking that out.
Our class,
I am
our
trying
students
to.
aren't averaging a
But you-
50% grade in their
Right.
classes.
Kids
So-
are not all failing. That's the point Lauren just brought up. Then
No, but
half
there are-
these kids
there are
should be
students
failing
that
their
are-
classes. And
there are
that's where the
students that are
correlation
struggling
needs
with
to
their
be, and that's what I'm not understanding.
And more importantly,
There always
Yeah,
have been
of
students
course.
struggling in the past, but I think this
Students
isn't a fair representation of how the students are doing.
we've
in their
looked for
classes.
correlations to
But see,
figure
then
out.
that's a problem. If this
But
is
we
not a
can't
fair
fix that problem.
representation,
Yeah, no.
then what is the reliability
Yeah.
and validity?
I don't
We-
think it,
we have
I think
these-
there's a problem with the reliability of the test, definitely.
We have looked at, instead of overall scores, test scores for students, to identify students that we think will struggle with the test. The problem we have is we have the problem with the bubble students. The kids are between the 725 and the 750. And to be honest with you, those are the kids that, with a little bit of extra help, usually will get a passing score or show growth. A lot of times, we're not even looking at passing scores. What we can do now with the linkage, we can see who shows growth over the years, and what teachers are having success with growth, or at what levels, and what kind of things are you doing in the classroom in order to show improvement. So I don't consider, in the school district, I don't consider a kid failing to have some of those scores if they're showing growth. But how we're held accountable as a school for our kids to be considered passing when they figure out all these formulas and ratings and everything else, they're looking at a straight 750, which is where we're at. Which is why are we a target school for a certain subgroup and things of that nature.
Do you, when you get these scores and you're able to compare them to other districts, do you look at the curriculum that they use? Like, we use Math and Focus, they use other curriculum, and like schools that are above the state average, do you, I know that there are many factors that play into where the scores fall, but is there an opportunity to actually look at our curriculum and maybe evaluate whether or
Yes,
not the curriculum is,
But what we've been
like,
finding,
is it really just a problem with how the students are learning, or is it what the students are learning? Maybe like,
but what we've been finding,
yeah.
first in the county in ELA, and third in the county for math, what we've been finding is the program, when we get to the place where it counts for the student graduation, we're performing very well compared to local schools around. I have conversations on a regular basis with High Point and Kinney about curriculum.
So what about, not the state, because that's obviously the whole state, but what about another county? Where do we fall with another county? Say Passaic, Morris, even
Well,
something down the shore?
I'll show you. They used to have a socioeconomic DFG factor rating where they rated you socioeconomically. Those
Yeah,
DFGs.
I'm not talking about socioeconomic, I'm just curious other counties and what tying into the curriculum, so that was an interesting question. You know, what are other counties doing? Where are they scoring? What curriculums are they using beyond just the two above, one above and one below us?
What other curriculums do schools use? Like, are there other high-performing schools in New Jersey that we can look to?
Yes,
or-
but what you're gonna find is, you see our number one there, that's the highest socioeconomic. And when you look at all the studies and the research and everything on schools, the biggest indicator of success on tests is not necessarily curriculum, it's socioeconomic status. If you could do, you know, I think Dr. McKay's talked about that before. You've talked about, I think, socioeconomic status and parental.
So then is there a correlation between socioeconomic status and math curriculums?
Yeah, I think, you know, when was the last time we revisited our math curriculum as a district?
5 years ago, when we brought in Math and Focus, right?
Yes, when I first came here 3 years ago, Math and Focus was being implemented, I believe, in grades K through 5 at the time, and they were moving forward to integrate it into the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades.
And have we gone back and looked to see if, you know, how that curriculum
Yes.
implementation
Yeah.
has panned out? You know, are there holes in it? Are there things that we're missing?
Well, yes, and that's what we spent a great deal of time in the last couple of years with all of our meetings. We sit down with teachers. What gaps do we have? When I first got here, I think we, originally, the test was, now we're doing a history on the PARCC test. Originally, the PARCC test was supposed to be given in three different time periods during the year, and you had to follow certain units, and the units didn't necessarily match up with all these different curriculums. So when I first got here, everyone was doing chapters in different orders of the book. As soon as the PARCC test was going to be 1 year, we scrapped that. We started from scratch. We started from the beginning. We've had lots of, you can talk to a lot of teachers. We've had lots of meetings about time guidelines, curriculum emphasis with the Math and Focus. And we actually go we'll do some of the concepts on the upper grade level. A lot of times I'll be in the classroom between second and fifth, fourth grade, and they'll be doing the same concept during the year at different levels. So it's hitting those higher critical thinking and depth of knowledge skills. That's tough. You're not going to have every kid master sometimes. But yes, we spend a great deal of time and effort. We take the. Do I have the? Sorry, I spared you from the. What is the data analysis on each question?
Oh,
They give us a chart of every single question on the PARCC test, and we look at it and we compare our own school question to the state question, the district evidence statement analysis. And from that, we'll look at the question and see what we may be lacking in the curriculum and put a new emphasis on that in the next school year. The person that developed the chart that correlates all these questions in his school district, Mr. Coleman, I believe he uses the Math and Focus curriculum as well. But there's a lot of data mining and looking at questions and trying to figure out where we're lacking in order to improve our skills. Unfortunately, it is, and I'm looking to make improvements, but overall, it's quite an intense assessment. And looking where we tried to put some effort because we weren't very happy with our scores in some of these grades, and we made a great gain in last year in the 7th and 8th grade tests on the PARCC test in mathematics. And the ELA as well. I forget about that because look at the scores in 8th, 7th, and 6th grade were tremendous gains in the last year.
So has Math and Focus been implemented in the district for about, is it 8 years, 10 years?
5 years.
5 years. 5 years, but you said that when you came in, it was already,
I was 3 years ago.
last year was the first year 8th grade had it. So we started K1, then we rolled it out to 2nd and 3rd, then 4th and 5th, then we did 6th, 7th, and 8th grade each year so that we could lend the support that the teachers would need. So last year was the first year 8th grade had Math and Focus fully for the full year. So
and they had been having it for the years prior.
No.
for the years prior, they were using a different curriculum as we were rolling it out.
But those students had it starting in 3rd grade,
Right.
most recently.
Yes.
We found in years past, we were putting new curriculums in. When you put new curriculums, you have to have a foundation before you jump right into the curriculum, and it's really tough to jump into a pretty aggressive curriculum like Singapore math or math and focus without having the background for it and learning a lot of the strategies and the perseverance and the problem-solving skills and how to solve things on your own without being guided and taught every step of the way.
So then, I'm sorry, I didn't hear or fully understand what you guys said. So the current 6th, 7th, well, moving forward, but last year, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, when did they begin math and focus?
They began it in the 8th grade last year, began it in 3rd grade.
Okay, so this is the curriculum that they have went through elementary school and middle school.
Right, it followed them up.
Okay,
correct.
that's what
So
I'm
that
thinking.
8th grade is the first grade that had it continuously, and there's a huge jump in their
Yeah, their scores are much higher.
proficiency. While there's still a long way to go, that was the
Eighth
biggest
graders'
jump.
math scores were higher, the ones that had math and focus,
So,
than the previous eighth graders
Yes.
that did not have math and focus.
Yes.
Are there, I guess I'm still like kind of focusing on the curriculum issue. You know, I know that there are many curricula out there. Like, are you comfortable with math and focus as a wonderful curriculum that's meeting the needs of our students? Or does this data, like, I don't know, does this data say we should be looking at our curriculum and maybe this is one of the variables in solving this problem? You know,
Well,
solving,
what-
I don't want to call
What
it.
problem are you looking for?
Yeah.
Right.
well,
Are
the
you-
cut scores aren't there. I mean,
Or
these
like
kids are not.
the amount of remediation that has to happen,
Well,
the number
that's-
of kids that are in that, you know, I don't know, what do you call it, the group, the cluster of,
Yeah.
intervention.
Like, yes, I look at the
Yeah.
percentages and there has been growth, but I'm going back to the average scores. And if I'm saying to myself, the cut score is 750 for 6th, 7th, 8th, 741, 743, 737, those did not make the cut. So yes, while the percentages have gone up, the cut scores, those are still for all intents and purposes in a 3. So that's the concern, so.
Well, our biggest concern was we're not having a response intervention program for these students. So they were going through, like, I've had kids that have gone to the child study team to get classified and don't qualify for services, and what do we have to offer them if they don't qualify?
But you see, here's the interesting thing, and that's why I was asking the reliability and validity. Because if this test is being used as a grading measurement of student progress and are they ready to continue as a quote-unquote standardized test, and this is being used as the measurement at the moment, and the students have, let's say, very good grades, then there is a discrepancy, which essentially that's the definition of specific learning disability. When your performance, your everyday performance, your grades, and how you're performing on a standardized test, there's a large discrepancy, that's the concern, and that would be a specific learning disability. So what I'm questioning is, are those students, have they been evaluated? Because that would be a child find.
Well, we usually do, but when you have, like, this test, when, on the state average, 50 to 60% of the kids are not achieving success, cannot be, or is when we compare it to some of the tests that we give for the child study team, you know, the PART test is a much harder test than some of the testing we do to see if they're performing at grade level.
Right, so then this goes back to reliability and validity. I guess that's just what I'm questioning.
I think another piece to remember is that there's also more that goes into their classroom grade than just assessments.
Test.
There's participation. So if a child is really struggling, but they're participating and they're giving their best effort, that's going to bring their grade up. If they're doing their homework, even if they're getting several of the questions wrong on the homework, they're getting grades for completing homework. And so those pieces will help bring their grade up.
But then
So the
that's
grade isn't
concerning,
overall.
'cause I get that, but then that would mean their grades are not a true reflection of their ability.
Of what the
Instead,
state of New Jersey
their grit
considers
and
a
their work
passing ability.
performance.
Well, but
Well,
isn't
Which
what,
is part
their
of their
testing
overall
ability.
ability.
but you're saying
Right.
the classroom grade is a grade based on the whole student,
Right,
and this is a grade based on
A test.
test-taking ability.
right.
Right, so perhaps if you looked at a test average of these students, just their test average during the year, not their whole grade, it might be more reflective,
More
but again, you know, their regular grade during the marking period is really, like you said, it's the whole student. Are they a kid who is great at projects? And that's helping their grade because they love hands-on stuff, they're doing that. You know, this test, they're sitting in front of a computer for an hour with a piece of paper and being told, have at it. And, you know, some kids just, that's not their thing.
That would be a fascinating, I wonder if you have that research. Do you have all the students' actual test grades in all their classes for 6th, 7th, and 8th, and then compare and see if there's a correlation between taking out the other variables of the whole thing, of the homework, the participation, the homework, whether or not they did it, and seeing if there's a correlation between these PARCC scores and their actual tests in class?
We do that for our intervention programs at the lower grades. If someone's recommended for intervention, we will go back into the previous years and pull out the test averages to see their performance.
But not 6, 7, 8? No.
As far as, well, we had, one of the problems I feel that we had in 6, 7, 8 is we have no intervention program in 6, 7, 8. So if we identify a kid who doesn't qualify for the child study team, what are we doing for that student? And a lot of times in year past, we've had some pretty high failure rates in some of our grade levels, and we're not providing the services or support for some of those students.
All right, I'll let them go.
I think another important piece to remember here is, and you guys touched on this before, and I'll get to it when I get to the language arts presentation, but part of this is definitely taking a good hard look at our tier 1 instruction, which is classroom level instruction. What are our holes there? What are we doing to fix them? And with using Linkit in the classroom, it breaks everything down by standards. So when we're giving our benchmark assessments throughout the year, which are our classroom assessments, we get an immediate report based on standards in a particular class. You know what, guys, we did not hit this standard well at all, and so we've made changes in curriculum. For example, vocab was a very low area for us. We made changes in our curriculum, and those numbers went up. So it's an ongoing process of making changes in that level 1 and then adding intervention for kids who continue to struggle with those curricular improvements.
And that's perfect, and exactly what you just said, have we been doing that in math? Because the language arts, the scores look fabulous.
Yeah.
So how will we change the curriculum then in math?
I don't think it's changing curriculum, I think it's changing how things are taught and maybe pacing, because it's not really, you could put any curriculum in front of me as a language arts teacher, and it's the way I teach it and the way my kids get it through my instruction. I've used 10 different curriculum in language arts over my career. My results have always been the same because it's the instructor that makes that personal, and so that they're talking about rolling it out across years helps to build those skills and to tweak curriculum.
And for me, they're a second year of implementation of MIF in 8th grade, and we're about 10% above the state average, and about 10 points, and about 10 points above the state average for our score as well. Second year.
I would be curious, I do want to hear the next part of the presentation, so I don't want to
Yeah,
like
so
belabor this, but I would be curious to see districts that are similar socioeconomic, if that's one of the big determining factors, but in other areas using different curriculum and see how they compare.
I used to do that all the time, but the way they group people socioeconomically was by district factor grouping, which they haven't rerun in years.
Right.
So you're talking about Vernon's DFG factor from, I'm not even sure how
No, when I
many
used to
years.
present to the board,
Right.
when I was
Yeah,
in,
it has to be 8 years since
as-
they've done a DFG.
when I was language
Right.
arts, head of the language arts, and I presented, I would always use the DFG, so you saw like schools.
But you,
And there were like schools. Pompton Lakes was like school, West Milford was like school, Vernon was like, there was like schools.
And they stopped
But
doing
now,
they stopped doing
Yeah.
reports on like schools.
but you can still evaluate what comparative districts use as their curriculum without having a formal DFG to go by. You could look at what Sparta's using and what these other
Yeah,
districts.
Pompton Lakes
Sparta's a
is
different
using-
DFG.
Yeah.
They've always been a different.
Right.
But Dr. K just says Pompton Lake, so why can't we?
Because it might not be the same DFG, it hasn't been run in 8 years.
Okay, but we can still see what
I mean, we
curriculums
can
are
kind of
out.
get a gist of who we're
Right.
similar to.
But
right?
like I
We don't
said,
want
when I'm
something
looking-
foreign.
when I'm
But it's
looking
not,
at overall-
it's not based off of enrollment, it's based off of the socioeconomic of your town.
Right, and we
That
know the
changes over
socioeconomic
time.
over time, and we have a gist of the
Yeah,
socioeconomic
we're
of
not,
other towns.
it's not a scientific analysis, but it's just an exercise.
I was hoping that they do a rerun of DFG so I could compare schools again by DFGs, because I used to do that every year when I was on the class.
Yeah, that would be.
And because Sparta, every year Sparta would be first in the county with their score. And when you ranked them with their DFGs, a
Right.
couple years, they were, so
Right.
it's tough. I just try to give some schools that are local, that are close by.
Right.
I could give all different types of schools, but right now, if I had a DFG to go by, I would do it. I used to download all the results from the entire state of New Jersey, sort them by DFG and do a ranking from that sort. But now, like I said, the DFG being out of touch after 8 years, they don't do a like school report anymore. I'm trying to give you some sort of a comparison of
Yeah,
schools.
and that's the information I would be interested to see regarding what curriculums we're utilizing. You know, the
Right.
same unscientific analysis of groupings of districts.
Right, and I'm pretty happy with our overall results. With first in the county in ELA and third in the county in math with our overall results. Who knows what the test is going to be in the future? You know, it's a constant. In the last 5 years, it's a constantly changing environment, and I'm trying to give you a snapshot of where we're at compared to some local schools. So
But
you
again,
know where we're working.
I just want to put the brakes on. There will be a test.
Yes,
There will be a test, and it's going to be a comprehensive test. It will not be a basic skills test.
it'll be a park-like assessment. I don't think it'll be as long, but until they come out and tell me, I will report when
Just
I do
telling
get
you.
results on what they are doing in the state. I'm eager to see. All of us are eager as we talk to each other across the county about what is the test, what do we need for graduation requirements. Do they have anything for the current sophomores so that this algebra isn't going to be the only test required for them to graduate?
We will be in full intervention mode next year if they do not change the graduation requirement.
Like I said, I'm just happy that we're finally offering some sort of an intervention for some of our students.
Yeah, oh, in
And-
Meadow, of course, yes. What I'm saying is,
Okay, thank you. Justin Vinny will report on the
all right.
Glen Meadow.
I'm Jess Rostami, for those who don't know, I'm the literacy coach at Glen Meadow. And I'm going to start off by going through the language arts park scores, first for special ed students, which were our target area, and then for overall at language arts to give you a little bit more detail. We'll move through it as quick as we can to keep moving along. But I think going into this, the important thing to know is that we did look at results from years past. We updated our instructional methods and some of the pieces in terms of how we were teaching. We've made changes to those, and all grade levels in language arts and math are doing that through the CUSAC process that happened over the summer. So those curricular and instructional changes will continue to happen, and hopefully we'll continue to see the growth.
And again, thank you to the board members for voting for the summertime curriculum work, which has been massive.
Yes. Okay, so if we look at language arts proficiency at Glen Meadow for special education, you'll see that there is a dramatic increase here. We showed proficiency in language arts across the board, and 8th grade experienced the most dramatic jump I have ever seen. We went from in 16-17, 2% proficient, to in 17-18, over 24% proficient. And the 17-18 state averages for special ed are not out yet. So the 16-17 averages are here just as a comparison, and those are the lines you see across. So you can see in 6th grade and 8th grade, we're well above the state average in language arts. 7th grade, we still have a bit to go, but they did make improvement this year.
What did you do in 8th grade?
Yeah.
That was the
What is the
intervention piece that we
That
put
was
in place.
our intervention program, and updating curriculum that hadn't been updated in a few years. So it was improving instructional methods, changing up some of the things that were taught in the order they were taught, those types of things.
Once we were identified as a target school, and I'll
Yeah.
give you, pass it back to you. Once we were identified as target school, those were the interventions that were put in place. And immediately you have to look at the curriculum and see how the test aligns with the curriculum. You have to see the way we're teaching it as well, and then make sure that the people that are running it know exactly what goal we had by May.
Right, and I do have to say that the common planning time played a huge role in this. This past school year, we had common planning, language arts, as a department had it all together. So the 6th, 7th, 8th grade general ed, special ed teachers were all in the same room talking, and so there was a much larger group to share ideas about this is what I'm struggling with, how do you do it? And so rather than having 3 faces to bounce those ideas off of, we had 10 people contributing ideas to how to improve things.
And
So
often
that
those
really
sessions became workshop sessions that either Jess ran or someone else ran about how to teach it.
Right. And we were looking at data on a weekly basis. Every Thursday was called Data Day. And so we were looking at benchmark scores, essay scores, multiple choice, all of those pieces on a weekly basis, and then making instructional changes for the coming weeks.
And that, of course, is tied in with Lincoln.
Now, were those project-based?
Some of it was project-based. So for vocabulary, we took our vocabulary curriculum and then added posters, PowerPoints, skits. So things that where we took a traditional curriculum, added a little more creativity, a little more interaction, to make it more engaging and interesting for the students, and then of course you see an increase.
And that's what the intervention classes are about.
Right, and the intervention program as well. So then when we boil into each grade level, this is 6th grade special ed ELA proficiency. Not only, so you can see a minor increase in the percent proficient, keeping in mind this is special ed, so we're not going to reach the 750 cut points right away. We're also not going to reach super high levels of proficiency right away. But we did see a small increase in those meeting expectations, but the bigger key here is that we saw a massive decrease in the lowest level of proficiency.
This is the piece that's important.
Right. And 63% of our special ed 6th graders improved their scale score from 5th to 6th grade. 7th grade as well also saw a small increase. I think what's important to notice here is that we actually have 2% of our special ed population in 7th grade who is exceeding expectations on the park, and we met another massive decrease in those not meeting from 45% to 25%, and 45% of our 7th grade special ed students showed growth. Eighth grade, this is where we saw that huge increase, and on the flip side, there was also a huge decrease in those not meeting, so you'll see an increase in the partially approaching and meeting, where those students moved up.
Now, do you just have to show growth, or do those students have to make the cut score?
In terms of
order to have the target school taken away?
Growth.
So it's both, it's the growth and then it's the percentage of your population that is proficient, and I believe that it was around the 20% mark. So in most of the grade levels, we met or are very close to meeting that, and then we just have to wait for the growth scores to come out, usually in October.
That should tell you something right there.
Exactly. It does tell us.
They don't even want you to get to 750 in order to get out of target score.
No, exactly. It's, the key indicator and the key piece is this, this back piece. They're looking at the bottom while we're looking at the top.
Right. But our goal for all of our students is to meet their personal potential as well as work towards proficiency. For most of our students, it's not unrealistic to say that they could eventually meet proficiency.
Yes, and they can.
Could you say that number again, the expectation from the state of how, like what percentage of our students are proficient?
So they never gave us concrete numbers in terms of that. Through conversations, I think at some point the 20% was mentioned, but we have never gotten official concrete, this is what you need to meet. So we're waiting for
No,
them
they
in
refuse to
October.
do that because they're comparing us to every other school in the state.
Right.
And what our problem was this area for our special ed students in ELA and math was too high and therefore put us in the bottom 20% or lower. And what our intervention program, what their intervention program has done is eliminated that concern and pushed up the overall score. So it'll be a combination of the cut with also the decrease in the students that are not meeting.
Right.
But it's, I'm just curious, it's 20% of students in special ed.
Special ed versus, it's special ed compared to special ed, the
And then-
cohort of special ed.
And then 20% is not an official number. They
Right.
never gave us an
Yes, right.
official.
Yeah.
And 72% of our 8th graders improved in their scale scores this year, which is a large number. In terms of the literacy lab that we ran last year, in 6th grade, 94% of those students who participated, 94% of those who showed growth were in our literacy lab program. In 7th grade, 100% of those who showed growth were in our program. And in 8th grade, 73% of those who showed growth were in our program. So that shows that even the program that we ran had validity. Those numbers are, when we look at the percentage of language arts growth, most, in some cases, all of that growth came from students who participated in the lab program.
Absolutely.
Which also shows here, these are the numbers we looked at last year when we created this program. The last year's sixth graders, 95% of those special ed students were eligible. Now it's in the 70s. In seventh grade, it stayed around the same. The incoming freshmen, 87% of those special ed students were eligible for remediation, and now it's dropped down significantly. The fifth grade class coming in had a slight increase in that, but there was not the same type of program run at Lounsbury, so.
Right, so this group that's graduating out of the program was in the program, and you see the drop. This group that's coming in needs the program. That's what this arrow indicates.
Yes.
Is there, or do these numbers reflect like a challenge to getting certain groups of students to take the test? Like, is that reflected in these numbers? Are they counted as scores? You know, students who don't participate are reflected?
So students who did not participate in PARC previously, but participated in our intervention program and took the PARC this year are included in our percentages for proficiency, but were not included here because we didn't have a baseline on them to show whether they had achieved growth or not. So we didn't take a kid who had a 0 and show growth at a 6 max. So those were not included in our growth numbers.
But there was one subset that did not achieve the 95% participation rate that was needed in order to be fine. They were at 92%, and the couple of tests that weren't taken, if you will, did count against us as a school.
Right.
So
You have to get it to a 95% participation rate, which we had throughout the district, but in certain subsets, we had less than 95%. Not a lot, usually down around 92% or 91%.
So the participation rate only affects the school's overall score, it
Yes.
doesn't affect the proficiency.
Yes.
That's, the proficiency is just from the students who took
Mhm.
the test.
And in addition to the other programs we ran, there was also a large push to increase the number of students who were taking the test.
Because they were in an intervention program that was preparing them for it, and they felt comfortable, and therefore the anxiety level was down.
Right. This one is a really interesting one. So the goal is to move 40% of your what's considered bubble students. They're close to proficient, but for whatever reason have not yet made it there. The goal is to move 40% of them a year into proficient. So when we look at our language arts scores, we in 5th to 6th grade, we met that. And in 6th to 7th grade and 7th to 8th grade, we totally blew that out of the water. So we're taking what they started with and finally moving some of those kids who have been close to proficient. We've now moved them into that proficiency range with some intervention and lab.
So if they're sitting at 741 or through 749, that group then moved in, as you can see, then moved into proficiency. And there's always concern in any testing about the bubble, about the students who are slowly just dropping below or just above, and making sure that that is retained if they're above, and pushing them in that direction if they're slightly below. That's age old. That has been for 30 years, worrying about the bubble.
With all of the efforts being made at intervention, are those techniques that are being taught and other approaches, is that transferable to other learning, or is it just specific PARC test taking?
No, so we do not focus on specific PARC test taking strategies. We're talking about global overall. When you look at a text, right, as a human being who's in the workforce, what do you need to know how to do? You need to know how to look at it, evaluate it, think critically, decide is this true, is this not true? And so we're not focusing on just test-taking strategies, it's that larger developing critical thinkers and critical writers. Yeah, which is where the projects and those types of things come in. It's not just test-taking strategies. While those may help some students, it's that larger, we can't get to all of that in the time allotted for language arts curriculum. So we do what we can there, and then those students who need additional help in those critical thinking skills can get that in an additional setting.
But being project-based, it's engagement. And engagement is a key piece to all of this, which is keeping them engaged in the process itself, especially in language arts.
So I'm going to quickly jump into the overall proficiency, which you saw at a high level through Mr. Rogers' presentation. So this has 4 on it here because I wanted to show the 16-17 compared to 17-18 as well as the averages. You can see the blue and the gold are the state averages, and in 6th and 7th grade we were above those in 16-17, and in 8th grade we were below. And now in all cases we are above the state average for language arts proficiency in all 3 grade levels.
Which is quite a turnaround.
Yeah.
Yeah, the high
Yeah,
school
in 8th
usually
grade,
had
it's
strong
huge.
scores, but this is quite a turnaround.
And then it's broken down into each grade level, which we've talked about before. In most cases, we are at or above the state average in all of these places, and you'll see the green arrows are indicating things that are great. So our meeting and exceeding has increased, but also overall, not just in our special ed population, that lowest level of proficiency has also decreased.
Right, and that's where it should be. You're down to 2%, you know, that's
Right.
where you're not meeting should be, right? Yeah.
Same thing for 7th grade. Our exceeding numbers went up here, and we're doing very well across the board in 6th, 7th, and 8th. You'll see that those trends mirror through in all 3 grade levels. And then you'll see scale scores here. So our scale scores have jumped. In 6th grade, we are equal to the New Jersey state average for scale scores overall. Our special ed scale score has also increased. In 7th grade, we're slightly below the state average, but it is negligible. And in 8th grade, we are well above the state average for overall, as well as the special ed, and
Okay,
there's
so-
a significant improvement there.
Jess, there's your comparison piece. They were asking for a early indicator about removing the target, right? Okay, so folks, that's where the state was. We were below that. That's where we are now. So that's that big jump that you saw in 8th grade, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the indicators are all strong.
And we're just waiting for official results on those growth indicators from the state.
Exactly, but then it's a comparison because other people have put intervention programs in.
And that's great growth, but it's not the 750 that the state wants for the kids to pass.
Right.
But the idea in education is to show growth from year to year with the students.
So we're making strides, but we still have a long way to go.
But the student growth proficiency is how our teachers are evaluated. So those that are in math and language arts are looking for the growth piece. You know, it gets
Right.
complicated, but that's the way they're evaluated.
And so we look at the same thing, like when we're looking at percentage proficient here and scale scores for the park, but we do the same thing for classroom-based assessments. So, okay, so for those kids who aren't proficient, are they showing growth? If they are, then we're on the right track. We can't get everybody from where they start to proficient in 1 year, but if they're on the right trajectory for showing growth, then eventually they will make that growth. And you saw that the expectation is 40% of those kids who are close will move up, and we had significantly more than that. So what we're doing is working, and we just need a little more time to continue that trend.
And a little more time on your schedule.
Yeah. And I'm going to hand it over to Mr.
Okay,
Gagliasso for math now.
Okay, so in math, we did a similar breakdown for 6, 7, and 8. I started off with just overall math proficiency. In 6th grade, we went from 41% to 38% meeting or exceeding, so overall is a negligible drop in meeting and exceeding for that whole grade level. And again, it is from 16, 17 to 17, 18 overall. For 7th grade overall, we greatly went up. We went from 28% to 41% meeting or exceeding expectations. And you can see also the not meeting, partially meeting, and approaching also were reduced because those students were brought over to the meeting and exceeding areas from 16, 17 to 17, 18.
And that was the intervention?
This was just overall students, so I'm sure the special ed portion of this absolutely had an impact on it. In 8th grade, our percent meeting or exceeding went up as well. And again, the partially and not meeting went down. So we are moving students across to the areas we need to be in. We actually went from no one exceeding to 1% of our population exceeding. And in Algebra 1, we went from, this is 8th grade only. 8th grade Algebra 1 went up from 92% to 100%. meeting or exceeding, and of that, 53% exceeded expectations on the test. Now our scale scores from 6th grade, again, a 2-point negligible drop for the overall, and our special ed had, again, a 6-point drop from 16 to 17, 18. In 7th grade, we went up in overall scale score, and special ed went up overall as well. And in 8th grade, our scale scores went up in both areas. From overall, we went from a 729 to 737, which is quite a jump, and our special ed went from 694 to 702, which is a whole different band from not meeting the up to partially. And our Algebra 1 scores in 8th grade increased slightly from 1617 to 1718. We went from overall 779 to an 808. Our 504 scale scores were around at 803, and the economically disadvantaged population went from a 786 to an 834 average.
That has to be the highest in the state. That one.
Yeah, that's it. That one
The
really.
economic disadvantage one.
When the report cards come out, I'll give a comparison to all.
Right, I think that that one's a really unbelievable.
Why do you think there was such a big jump in that category?
In that category, again, it's hard to say because really across the board, like Mrs. Rustami was saying, we're always editing our curriculum. The common planning time weekly, we're meeting 2-3 days a week and just sitting and saying, okay, what do we need to look at? Where are areas we're struggling? Where are you finding successes in class? Perhaps there was a section, everyone has that certain topic that, every year when you get to it, you're trying to find new ways to present the information because it's a struggle for the kids to grasp. And, with the teachers collaborating, they're finding new ways to get the information across. And, with our new program and really pushing the critical thinking skills, I think it's finally coming through that these new techniques and the new instructional efforts we're making are coming to fruition.
How big did you say the 8th grade Algebra 1 class is? How many students?
40.
Yeah,
40.
right around 40.
It's a
Two
little over
classes.
40.
Both are with Fred Garner, right?
Correct.
Yes.
So are those like 2 classes of 20 students, or how big are those classes?
It varies. I'd have to look, but I think we're in the low 40s for total population. So both classes were around 20, maybe low 20s.
Percent proficiency for special education, 16, 17 to 17, 18. 7th and 8th grade levels showed proficiency improvements. From 7th grade, we went from 5 to 10%. 8th grade, we went from 2 to 5%. And we had a drop in 6th grade.
And I just want to point out, this is where you can see from year to year, you look at the gains from year to year, but really, these kids, these kids are these kids. These kids, the 5% here, I apologize. So like the same kids that were passing the year before pass. It's a matter of showing growth with the other students that we generally have.
Yes.
So it's hard comparing scores across from year to year. The same kids that passed the previous year are the ones that generally.
So 6th grade in 16, 17, 10% of the special ed population had proficiency. In 17, 18, in 7th grade, that same population, 10%, had proficiency. So you can see from 16, 17 to 17, 18, the 6th grade proficiency went down, but it's 2 different groups of students. So they did carry over. On 6th grade, special education math proficiency, we had 3% meet or exceed expectations. That was pretty much just meeting. The real success in this area was our not meeting went down. So we dropped 7% in not meeting, and we're able to bring them over to partially, and we're trying to continue that trend over, just like we were in all the other areas and the other grade levels.
Right, so this could easily be your bubble people.
Right.
You can move over there, and this group has to move into the bubble. So this is where the intervention piece would be.
Right. In 7th grade, we went up, meeting or exceeding went from 5 to 10%. Our approaching increased, and our partially increased, and our not meeting greatly decreased. So we are moving, again, like Dr. McKay was saying, we're moving our kids across the board into the bands, into that bubble area, and we're trying to move those kids up into the meeting area. For 8th grade, we went from 2% to 5% meeting, 10% to 21% approaching. We had a slight drop in partial and a greater drop in not meeting. So again, all the trends are in the correct direction. So this is showing our growth for the students who participated in the math lab that we did just for 3 months during this year. So 33% of the 6th grade special ed who showed growth participated in the math lab. 61% of the 7th grade special ed who showed growth participated in the math lab. And 73% of all the 8th grade special ed students who showed growth were part of the math lab program. For our special ed math lab, 8th grade special ed yielded higher scores when compared to all of the 8th grade special ed. So anyone who participated in the math lab program had higher scores than generally across the board in 8th grade special ed. And then it was 6th, that was a typo, 6th and 8th grade students eligible to participate who declined did not make proficiency in the program. So if they declined the program, they ended up not making proficiency. So we're hoping that we get more in the program throughout the year.
Right. In the past, some students declined being in the first intervention program, and it didn't happen.
So proficiency in math lab participation correlation, 58% of the special ed students who participated in our 3-month math lab showed growth overall.
It was only 3 months because the school became a target school in October, and everything in place by June. And the test, of course, was March.
Right.
What percentage of, 58%, what percentage of the whole population of special ed students participate in the math lab? This is 50%, 58% of the participants.
Right.
But like what?
58% of the participants were in the math lab. The actual percentage who participated in math lab, I can get that to you. I have it.
I don't know if it's a relevant piece of information, but
It was 95 students, so I don't know what the number was.
Yeah. Yeah, overall.
Yeah.
So is it possible to take some of the, because our goal is we get everybody to show improvement, and some people are declining participation in the math lab, but ideally.
That was the option last year.
That was last year. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it was a short term and we were changing
Right,
their
it was on the
schedules
fly
mid-year, but
mid-year.
still we had participation rates that were over 80%. In some cases, it was drastically over 80%.
Participation in part?
In the program,
In the lab.
even though we were changing their schedule mid-year.
Even though we were changing schedules, we had 80% participation because we have people today that came to us who do not have math lab or literacy lab in their schedule and asked us to make it happen.
Are there ways to take the things that you're doing in the lab setting and bring it into the gen ed classroom? Is that the ultimate goal, where you test it out in the smaller setting, see the effect, and then?
And a lot of it really is that the students are getting the instruction in their regular ed classroom, and then they're just getting a reinforcement. They're getting another period to work on this stuff. So when maybe they were on the borderline of grasping the concept in class, instead of now waiting until homework or waiting until the next day to go over it again, they have another period during the day that they can say, hey, we did this in class today. Can you walk me through this? I'm not quite sure I have it right. And they're able to really drive it home.
And when you look at
to drive that home, sorry, Jessica, there's no homework coming out of the lab classes.
Correct.
None. This is a chance for them to explore, to do project-based, actually use what they've learned in their math classes.
So there's another section here, course selection presentation. Are we having explanations? I was reading through that.
The course selection was, I had showed that
did
to
you
you in
add
the
this?
past, yeah.
Because it said a approximately 60% of the junior population. Does that mean 60% of our Glen Meadow student population requires intervention? I'm just want to make sure I was reading this right. Of both special ed and gen ed. So 60% of our population requires.
It's below the cut score.
And now that we have updated, that was pre this year. So it's now dropped to, depending on the grade level and whether you're talking about language arts or math, it's between 40 to 50% of a
It has
given
dropped
grade
to
level.
40%.
And we're hoping that it drops even more drastically after implementing the program for everyone. This isn't a program we want people to be in every year.
Well, I guess that's a question I have, because I mean, this is, I keep hearing RTI, so it's response to intervention, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And the goal for that is only 20% of your population ideally should be in response to intervention level 2. And so our goal is to, as we continue to do this, drastically decrease the number of students who are eligible for that intervention as we improve our tier 1 instruction and as we fill in some of those academic gaps for students.
Gotcha, because I'm just trying to take that, what I'm reading here, this, trying to figure out the percentage, but I'm also, the question I have here is because I'm looking through everything and it's for a year. RTI, this is the part I'm getting confused about. RTI is not meant to be for a year. Like I was taking notes, there should be benchmarks.
Yep, clarify. Go ahead.
We have benchmarks that we're setting for this math lab throughout the year. That whole presentation was what we did prior to implementing the math lab for these 3 months. So
Well, I'm gonna go on further. Because I understand last year was 3 months because of the time it came out, but students can't just be kept in RTI in an arbitrary manner per se. There has to be benchmarks at a certain point for them to get out.
Go ahead.
But you guys are setting a year.
So we worked on it. Go ahead.
We've worked on, we have benchmarks, we have other diagnostics, we developed curriculum. If you saw on the slide before, we had the most success in 7th and 8th grade, and we brought those teachers in the summer to develop the RTI program, and they developed a lot of materials with it as well that have these benchmarks to show growth. And talking to Dr. McKay earlier and some other people, maybe a possibility if they show a certain amount of growth where they're going to have success, I think it's January, February when we get the second benchmark, if they see growth, possibly giving them an option.
I'm going back with my education mind. It can't be 6 months. RTI's majority are 8 weeks, 12 weeks. Like how can, I guess I'm wondering, is the state stepping in and saying you have to make it this long? Because an RTI, you have to be able to show, because from a special ed perspective, there has to be a multi-tiered system support, which you have, but there has to be progress monitoring done. That's the whole basis of RTI. If a child is not making progress, then the next step is an evaluation. So my question is, you can't make a child sit there for half of a school year or a whole school year before you know they have to be evaluated or for them to be able to get out. That's the part, I mean, this is where I'm wondering, where did the arbitrary year come up?
Well, we're having a year, the program is implemented full year, but students will have benchmarks where they can test out. And the monitoring will be done, weekly, where they're going through and they're giving
when
assessments.
can they test out?
And what typically happens in one of those shorter programs that you're talking about, a 6-week, a 12-week program, is that the focus of the intervention changes every 6 or 12 weeks. So the first one might be vocabulary. They test out of that, and then we test for another one. A student may move out and then move back in. So
but wait a second, then this makes no sense. If you're using CARP scores, cut scores, then that is what they're being evaluated on, nothing else. They're grades, they're wholesome,
but those cut scores are made up of multiple subtests in language arts and in math. So there are multiple areas. So we're looking at an overall cut score in language arts. There are 5 subtests that will be focused on throughout the year. So almost all of those students struggle in multiple areas, and so the focus will continue to change.
But then, so what then that means a student can't get out? Explain to me how a student gets out of this program, because RTI, students cannot stay in for a year. The whole basis of a level 2, level 1 is classroom, level 2, okay, if you're pulling kids out, all right, now you're going to the next level, you're going to level 2. Those students have to have progress monitoring of benchmarks to either move back down to a level 1 or out, or they have to go from a level 2 if they're not making enough progress to a certain point to a level 3
Correct.
with an evaluation. So that's where are we going? And then also if a student is making enough progress, regardless, they have to be able to get out of the system. It can't be till January or a whole year.
Right.
So,
Well, so if a student is struggling in one area, let's say it was one thing, then yes, in 6 weeks, we could do a remediation in that specific area, go through, be giving benchmarks all along, and they would test out of the program at that point and say, okay, now we no longer need tier 2, and like you said, maybe not even tier 1, they're just out of the program. Many of the students are in multiple areas showing areas in need of growth. So
Right.
for us to hit, 6, 7, 8 significant concept areas in a 6 to 12 week period.
but you see, that's not RTI then. RTI is an individual basis. It's the equivalent being used in a gen ed situation
But
of
you can't,
special
yeah, but you
education.
can't break it out like that. There's no
But
way
you
to
can't
schedule
keep
it.
kids in there for a year.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We have a benchmark system, and we will move them out. We're not trying to keep everybody in. We're trying to make sure that when our students go into the test, that they are prepared for it, and that we give them a course that gives them an understanding of how to, the deeper intellectual thought that comes with this test. They warned us years ago when they brought the park in, that it's not a basic skills. They're looking for students to do deeper thinking. And that's what we're hoping to do with a project-based class like we have.
Right, and
We're
that's
not even putting,
wonderful.
we're not even putting grades connected to this class.
Right, but then see, that's the problem, and that's why I'm trying to understand. It is not a broad-based curriculum. RTI is based on an individual student need, and that individual student will have their own individual benchmarks. So, yes, I understand some kids need multiple from both sides, or just math, or just English language, but how is it being drawn up for an individual child is my question. You can't say, well, they have multiple, which I understand, but then maybe, because it is project-based, one student may not need, let's say, help in vocabulary, but another student will. So then that student who doesn't need help should not be working on the vocabulary, instead something else, reach that benchmark, move on. So how is that being put through?
So when you're looking at the class size for these classes that we're talking
10.
about, most of them are 6, 10, 12. I think the biggest one was 17, somewhere around there. So when you're looking at that, and then we have the individual park subtests, but then also in September they take an assessment in class where we get for every student a standard report.
Right.
This student is meeting these expectations and these standards. So those reports will be used by the instructors of the literacy and math lab to then group those students within their class into smaller groups.
And then, if that student, let's say 3 of them need help on vocabulary,
Right.
when can those 3 individual students reach their individual benchmarks and then move on or come out of the program? You can't arbitrarily take students and put them in there for a year. That's my concern.
Right. Well, if there was a student who only had, let's say, just vocab as just an example, and that was their one thing, if they showed progress in that area and showed proficiency in it, and that was the sole area where they were showing weaknesses, then after, when we're giving these diagnostics throughout the program, they could test out and they would go back into the regular classroom. Really, the ultimate goal of this program is to give students the support where they previously had been lacking, and we want them to find success in their education.
We're
because so
mandated
many
by
of
the
them-
state to do this.
Right.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I just want to
Mandated
make
by
sure.
the state
yes.
to do this.
Now,
Right.
is the state telling you to do it for
Can
a
we
year?
go into
Are they
a
trumping RTI? That's
Well,
my question.
We have to submit a plan to the state
Right.
that covers an entire school year in how, for all of our non-proficient students, how are we going to address this for an entire school year? So that has to be submitted to the
But
state.
does
yes.
that mean that individual students then are required to stay in there the whole year? Because I'm not seeing anything about the kids
If they
being able
don't
to
meet any
benchmark
type
out.
of benchmark, then yes, they would
Right.
stay in there.
And
all
we-
year.
But I'm asking about kids who do meet benchmarks.
But when
Why
we're-
is it not to be able to do
No,
that?
if they
Go
met
to a
benchmarks,
special.
they would graduate out.
And I think it's
Then
important
yeah.
to know here that when we're looking at the population of students who are in here, the majority of them are lacking and need support in most, if not all, of those areas that we're talking about. So there are, those students who only need it in one or two areas will, of course, move through the program quicker.
Yeah, see, that was never mentioned or get out. That's why I want to make sure, because
Right.
RTI, they need a benchmark to get out. I guess my other question is, have we notified parents in writing? Because when you put a student in RTI, you have to notify the parents in writing. Have parents received letters? And also stating that their child can receive an evaluation?
No, this is not special ed, no. they-
No, no, it's not special ed, but RTI, you need to notify parents. So I'm,
Right, no, with the state, they've told us that we need to put the classes together, we need to make sure that the classes are small, we need to make sure that there's benchmarking, and we need to make sure that the pieces that were missing from the test were addressed, so we've done all that.
so then the state did not tell you that the parents have to be notified in writing.
No,
So,
Did the state say that they don't have to be?
no, no, there was nothing about that, they approved our plan, and our plan is more comprehensive than most school plans, because we set it up as opposed to doing a pull-out model, where the students would be identified and then pulled out of their classes, which we didn't want.
Which
We
is-
wanted to supplement their education, not supplant it. And that's a key piece here.
Which is what we
Not
had to
pulling
use.
them out of English class to go have test prep. This is them taking small classes in which it's project-based to increase the amount of time that they get to spend on this subject matter.
right, but
Which is what other districts who
you
have,
do?
other districts who have shown that significant growth. We spoke to other districts in talking about this outside of Sussex County in districts that we met at professional development seminars, and they did the same exact type of program that we're talking about, saw huge growth, and then were able to significantly decrease the number of students who were in those overtime. And
Do you
that's our
know-
ultimate goal.
Did those other districts notify parents? Because there's a large group of parents in the Glen Meadow population who have no clue what these classes are, why their child is there. And also these parents, I mean, from a special services perspective, have a right to know their child has a right to be evaluated, and that the RTI process can't hold it up. So I just want to make sure parents are notified that they're aware of what's happening with their child.
And just like we do for any other student, if there was a student in one of these particular classes that we saw was continuing to struggle, we would put them through the INRS process and send to child study team immediately. If the strategies we're not using here, if the strategies we're using here are not working, we're immediately going to go to INRS and child study team and contact the parent for those things. This piece is an overall.
Yeah, because if you're at a tier 2, you're already at pretty intensive. Tier 3, you're moving up.
Right.
Is there going to be any family and community engagement?
Sure, we put the podcast out yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a few parents that I'm speaking to.
So we'll have our night meetings.
Individually.
Yeah, I've talked to a few parents as well, so.
Okay. So then as long as the parents are notified, and also, are the parents going to receive the progress monitoring so they know how their child's doing as they go along, or where their deficits and strengths are?
We have the data, sharing where the student's at, and that will also help the parents work at home.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering too, bringing the
Absolutely.
community and family.
And when we've done interaction and other types of programs in the past, we've sent home progress reports. Your child is making progress in this area, still needs continued support in this area, and so I would expect the same thing.
Okay. Do you know how often you'll be sending home the progress? I mean, these are information when you notify the parents to let them know, because, like I said, there's so many, and you said you've spoken to them, parents are just confused. Unfortunately, even on social media, it's evident. I mean, they just,
There's also, if it's 60%, or maybe it's closer to
40 to
40,
50 now, depending on the grade level.
but how many kids is that? 40 to 50% of all of Glen
So
Meadow?
if you're
Of
looking
the
at,
grade
of the grade level, so if you're looking at a class of the classes range between 225 and 252 or something, I believe there. So you're looking at anywhere between 100 to 120.
Per grade level.
Yeah.
And then times 3 grades
Right.
are going to be flowing through this RTI system, how often are these classes meeting?
Every day.
On a rotating basis, so if a student needs both,
Right.
they'll get language arts one week, math the next week, and they'll rotate through those two.
This is an incredible number of students getting
Right.
second class session on these topics. This is
The goal is to decrease that.
to 20%.
Right.
Yeah.
Hopefully lower.
Yeah, it's just.
As we improve level one instruction.
I mean,
I mean, you still have the
it
sports,
sounds
that's-
amazing, and like the scheduling involved in making this work is incredible. I feel like probably, maybe we've talked about this, probably this class, like because they're taking this class, they're not getting an elective, maybe, like.
But they have, every child has.
Every child has one,
They
just
all
like
have
they
one.
did in fourth
They all
and
have
fifth
one.
grade, and yes. they
Yeah.
all
Just
have
like they
one.
did in fourth and fifth grade.
Yeah, it just, I keep like kind of, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but it does feel like with this significant quantity of students having to go through this kind of intensive intervention process, it does seem like this has to make its way into the gen ed classrooms so that you can get to this 20% target
Right, and
number.
when you saw the slides we presented earlier, some of those showed very dramatic growth. And
Yes.
that's because the things we were doing, the teachers that were teaching those classes were also classroom teachers.
Yes.
And the kids were learning things here and taking them back to their classes. And so
Yes.
that it wasn't just limited to those number of students. Those strategies, those skills, those thinking ability, that moved throughout. We even heard from other teachers, social studies teachers, like, this kid wrote one paragraph for me or one sentence for me at the beginning of the year and just turned in an essay with 6 paragraphs. You know, I had kids in the hallway stopping me, I just wrote 7 paragraphs and the best news is they made sense! And then he walked away. so those, they're working.
Yeah.
And for me, it's providing the help for the students who don't qualify through the CSD process. The kids that don't qualify,
Wait, and I'm not interrupting, we don't know if they qualify. They very well could.
No.
This could be a deciding
no, we've
factor,
had kids tested.
but not all 50% of them.
Oh,
No.
But that's what I'm saying, there could be,
But
if
there's,
we don't know.
but there's been kids over the years that don't qualify through the child study team evaluation,
Right.
and we don't seem to have the means to help them have success and watch them. The teachers are trying to differentiate in their classes of 22, 23 students, and they don't have their success. Now to actually have a program where we can help them and to achieve success in their classroom as well. I'm really looking forward to it and making some progress on that. And the bubble students, a majority of those kids are bubble students. I'm hoping a lot of those bubble students first year that or the first half of the year or by the end of the year to have the program, and we've achieved what we wanted to with this program. And if we have it, and you know we're doing it all at once. If they had it in 5th grade or 6th grade, maybe by 7th and 8th they won't need it. And it's a matter of getting a decreasing number of what the state considers for meeting expectations as well, not necessarily us.
Now, I have another question. How are the students notified they were put in this class? So they were surprised? Like who,
Can we say that?
how did the students know?
Yeah, they were surprised.
Because that's something,
From when you got your park score that you realized it.
okay.
Because it came with
Yeah, but they came out to 7. We were allowed to release. We were stuffing envelopes. They were released to 17, and we tried to get those out as soon as possible so that they had the park scores along with the labs. So when the podcast came out,
Always been a case of timing with the state. They want us to do these programs, but then they give us the scores on the 17th to send them.
we weren't allowed to give them.
They're embargoed.
Oh, I understand you weren't allowed to
They're
release them that early, but I'm just,
We weren't allowed to communicate
So
any of that until August
50% of our
17th.
students got surprised that they were put in a tier 2 remedial class. Like, that's just a question. Maybe that's part of the family and community component.
Was there any sort of letter sent out on the 17th when the scores were coming out?
I sent a letter out to the parents last year when we were at Target School explaining everything that was happening with the action plan. But most importantly was the 17th was when the state released their park scores. Nothing can be done before that. And we had to set up a schedule, so.
No, but that week they could have gotten a letter explaining what this class is and why they're in it.
Yeah, because one of the things I noticed when I watched the pod, it doesn't state the criteria. So I think there's still a great deal of confusion. What is the criteria for these students to be in there? And it was never specified, it was the 750 and below cut score of the park. So I think, again, talking about community and family engagement, that needs to be specified because parents are just so confused, questioning, you know, and some parents even said, well, my child, I opted him or her out of the park. And they don't realize by opting out last year for this year, that then played a role in their child being put in this lab.
Not necessarily though. We did use our benchmark assessments, and if a child scored meeting proficient expectations on our benchmark assessments, then they were not placed, regardless of whether they took the park or not, they were not placed.
Okay, so that was not the sole component of them opting out, okay. So, but then again, that needs to be relayed to parents very clearly, because I think right now, if we're trying to build pride and community engagement and family engagement, all of these components need to be put together, because this is, you know, middle school is a very important time frame socially and self-esteem, and if we're trying to work on students' mental health, it's so important that we meet their needs and making sure they're aware of why they're in there, the parents are, you know why they're in there, the process, benchmarks, progress monitoring. I mean, parents just need to know, and so do the students. So.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, there's certain minutes that we
We
can.
cannot approve any of the minutes tonight, so none of them, because there's at least one person who's here on an extension, so all the minutes will be pushed off to the September agenda. Okay. Letter H, correspondence.
We received from Melissa Garzon, Stephanie Baumgarten, and Lauren McDonald.
President's report, other than I hope that everybody has a smooth opening to the school year, since this is the last summer meeting before school year starts. Hope everybody has had a healthy summer and a safe summer, and we look forward to everybody coming back to school in the next couple of weeks. Committee reports, anybody have any committee reports? Seeing none. Public participation, anybody would like to say anything, I'll open to the public for any items on the agenda or any student comments. Seeing no one here, I'll close it to the public. Superintendent's report, Dr. McKay.
Good. Informational matters are on the addendum. Much thanks to Ms. Gebhardt and her summer staff for the excellent summer academic camp. The program was a great success this past July. I want to congratulate everyone that was involved in that program. Much thanks to Mr. Kendler and Ms. Nancy Schultz and all the terrific teachers and aides for the successful ESY program this year. One point of interest is that the program's attendance has improved remarkably since we moved it from 30 days to 23 days. It seems to really work with the July dates, and then people have time for their vacations and all the other things that they want to get done in the summertime. So a hearty thanks to all of them. The Vernon Township High School graduating classes of 1977 through 1980 had their reunion on August 10th. So I had the pleasure of meeting them before they had their big shindig that night and gave them a tour of the high school. They came from as far as California and Holland for the reunion, and it was great to see their wonder at all the changes in the school. Remember that they were in the high school before 3 of the additions were done. There was one addition over one floor, there was another addition, and then the big addition. They were clearly wowed by a couple of things, but you would have thought that they were kids in high school again when the 40 of them were in the library upstairs at the end of the tour, and they found their old yearbooks in our library. And they started to go through and point out who was there and who was not there, and regretfully some that had passed away. But the man from Holland remarked at the end of the evening, he put his arm around me, he says, we always hear that American education is failing, but this school is an excellent place. And he was very taken with all of the new programs. I'd like to publicly thank our teachers who spent their summer doing our curriculum work. We have done more curriculum work this summer than we've ever done before. The state curriculum person was in on the early discussions, that's Steve Goldman. And we've had great curricular work, particularly at Glen Meadow. and also at the high school. A phenomenal undertaking as we prepare for CUSAC, which is one of the concerns that we have, making sure that our scores are there for the part of the CUSAC that talks about scores and teaching and proficiency. And then last Monday evening in Glen Meadow, on the field between Glen Meadow and Cedar Mountain, Mr. Piccirillo held the Vernon Community Movie Night screening of Coco on the soccer kickboard. There was over 200 people in attendance. It was a wonderful event and will be reprised this Monday with the movie Sing, and the following Monday on Labor Day with Moana. So Mr. Piccirillo has got a great following there. There was people cooking out. The mayor was there. Other people were there. So it was a great time by all. And then this past spring, the Vernon Board of Ed approved a program through the Vernon Coalition that allowed 15 of our student leaders from high school to attend a week at camp in Stillwater called the Lindsay Meyer Teen Institute Camp. And although they were having a great time, and it was 3 great days, the camp was closed because of a neurovirus outbreak. So last evening, I called all of our students at home to make sure everybody was okay. There were 2 students who were sick and recovering. We were concerned about them, but I wanted you to know that everybody's home safe and sound now. So it was a nice conversation with the parents as well, who seemed to think that the program was great. It was just a shame that it was closed because of that. All right.
Recommendations?
Sure. It is recommended that the board approve the following faculty and staff resignations, retirements, terminations, leave transfers, assignment changes, appointments, stipends, salary adjustments, student teaching and mentoring, and it continues on to the addendum.
Motion for 2A, please.
So moved.
Ms. McGee, second.
Second.
Ms. Coughlin?
Godwin.
Sorry.
All right.
Questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mrs. McGee,
Yes.
Mr. Annunziata,
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta.
Yes.
Motion carries.
2B, it's recommended the board approve professional development travel that complies with the provisions in New Jersey state statutes annotated NJSA.
Motion for 2B, please.
Motion.
Ms. Bucieri, second.
Second.
Ms. McGee, questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mrs. McGee,
Yes.
Mr. Annunziata,
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta.
Yes.
Motion carries.
It is recommended the board approve the harassment, intimidation, and bullying, school safety, and random drug testing reports for July and August. That's attachment B. You know that Cedar Mountain and Walnut Ridge had children in it, so they had some drills.
Okay. Well, yeah. Motion for 2C, please.
Motion.
Ms. Bucieri, second.
Second.
Ms. McGee, questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mrs. McGee,
Yes.
Mr. Annunziata,
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Ms. McGee just brought to my attention that Jeanette Emmerich.
The board has decided to not allow the rescinding of Ms. Emmerich's clinical emergency care, so I'll put that forth as a, we'll make that 2H, and I'll set that up, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay, I'll
2H.
set that up as,
So we'll vote on that separately.
Mhm.
Since we already voted to rescind it, we'll vote to put it back in.
yes. Which
Thank
you'll be
you,
doing
Ms.
for
McGee.
Yep.
We're on D.
Yep. It is recommended the board approve CEC, Center for Evaluation and Counseling Facility in Sparta, to be used for certain student cases where an evaluation by our team needed further exploration by an outside group, and that's the language put together by our CST people.
Motion for 2D, please.
Motion.
Ms. Bucieri, second.
Second.
Ms. McGee, questions or comments?
It's it's written in the past tense. Is this for going forward?
Yes,
or
for going forward.
retroactive?
No, it's for going forward.
Okay.
And this is after members of the child study team visited.
Yep,
Yeah.
we all visited together, met with them all morning long, then had a discussion afterwards about the value of this. I want to point out that an evaluation done by them is $700, which is considerably cheaper than if a person had a full evaluation in Denville or at Newton.
Okay.
And quality-wise, like the quality of the
The
evaluation?
CST team knew that there were certain times that they would not send the person here, but they knew that this was a great middle ground.
So it's circumstantial.
Yes, it is.
And then for those other cases, there are other venues?
Then they would go to Newton.
And the decision to use it would be made by the CST.
The same people who evaluated these. That's why I brought them over.
Right.
And one of the other things is I brought to Mr. Kepnes's attention, I just had a question. I don't know if he's going to address it tonight or
It's on the
next-
agenda.
Oh, it is?
About the
Yep.
about the medical expenses?
Yeah,
Yeah.
if Dr. McKay just said it's $700. Okay, we can discuss it later.
Yeah, I
then.
put it on, we put it on the other.
It's on Steve's section.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments about 2D? Roll call vote.
Mr. Annunziata?
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri?
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Sparta?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, 2E, it is recommended the board approve student-funded trips not to exceed 2 days out of school.
Motion for 2E, please.
So moved?
Ms. McGee, second.
Second?
Ms. Coughlin, questions or comments?
Could you
Yep.
explain
Yes, I
that?
can.
Seems so specific.
Sure, it's high school, and we have now presently concern about overnight trips taking a lot of time away from school, right? But we became very strict about our trips. We didn't want the teams traveling, et cetera. And there is a movement amongst some of our athletic teams and some of our other people that they'd like to try to have trips where they start, say, on a Thursday and Friday, and then the weekend, where they could be away for a little bit but not miss too much school. I have talked to Mr. Foley about this, and I thought maybe it'd be better for every other year for sports teams.
You mean like the spring training?
Yeah, exactly. So,
Okay.
but again, I want to limit it because I know that our teachers really have a problem with students being out too much. So I put this forward as a compromise. I thought 2 days might be a way to allow our students to travel, but also make sure that they're academically responsible for being in school.
So would
Wouldn't
that be for other trips too, though, not
Yes, it
just
would be.
athletic teams? Because I
Yeah.
know there's other trips that are gone, I think, more than 2 days.
Exactly. So the question is, what about some of those longer trips? They would apply for a waiver. But most of our trips, like even the band trips, they
What
sort of
about-
wrap it
what
around a
about the
weekend.
trip out to Boston?
Boston is a 1 day out of school.
That's only 1 day
Yep.
at school.
Wouldn't this be better in a policy
Okay.
from the
Next
board,
question.
not as just a one-time motion, so we have a clear-cut policy on what the options are for overnight trips?
I don't know if we could write a policy up.
Honestly, there might be one. I would have to ask school boards if they have a field trip policy and then what it reads. I don't know.
And then a procedure for a waiver that's clearly outlined on how to do it.
Do you want to table that and then see what we can find for?
I think
Well, I
we
don't
can-
want to stop anybody.
Yeah, I think we can vote on it
Right.
as a recommendation and then
Okay.
investigate a policy for it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think
All
that's
right.
probably best.
Yeah, let me
That's a good
write
idea.
myself a note.
Any other questions about that?
One of the other things I'd like to, on the policy and the concept of the taking like 2 days out of school, Mr. Kepnes, if you could make sure, one of our policies we had to adjust, and granted we could work on that, but making sure it contains, like if a student has special medical needs or special ed needs in any capacity, since we revised ours last year. But I do have another question. How would those 2 days, what would they be counted as for attendance? Like what would it say on this?
They would be absentee. They would be absences.
Unexcused?
There is no unexcused excused at this point, unless the state changes the way we have to write it.
Okay, so it would just be absence?
Mhm.
Okay.
Anything else? Roll call vote.
Mhm.
Mr. Annunziata?
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri?
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Sparta?
No.
Motion carries.
2F, it's recommended the board approve an administrative leave of absence for employee 6195 with no pay for 180 days.
Motion for 2F, please.
So moved?
Ms. McGee, second.
Second?
Ms. Coughlin, questions or comments? Be careful with any questions. Roll call vote.
Mr. Annunziata?
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri?
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Sparta?
Yes.
Motion carries.
2G, a motion to reaffirm the HIB incident. You can see the number there, following the requested hearing that was held on August 9, 2018.
Motion for 2G, please.
Motion.
Ms. Bucieri, second.
Second.
Ms. Coughlin, questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Bucieri?
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. McGee?
Abstain?
Mr. Annunziata?
Yes.
Mr. Sparta?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Good. And 2H, we're going to reinstate clinical emergency care, which is 2 separate marking period classes taught by Ms. Emmerich, effective tomorrow.
Motion for 2H, please.
So moved?
Ms. McGee, second.
Second.
Ms. Bucieri, question or comments? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Coughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Annunziata?
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri?
Yes.
Mr. Sparta?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Anything else, Dr. McKay?
That's it.
Mr. Kapnis?
Very good. Bottom of page 5 on your regular agenda is the beginning of the use of buildings and grounds. Field trips at the top of page 7. And I'm going to just skip to the middle of the page, letter D, discussion, your obligation for various medical costs. And I'm going to tell you what I've gotten from New Jersey school boards, but then I do want to continue the conversation because I had additional questions based on their response, and I reached out to them today and I wasn't able to get an answer. Ultimately, initially, this came up when we have a suspicion of being under the influence, a student. And when we send them out, the policy is that if we send them out for being under this or suspicious under the influence, we are ultimately responsible for the cost if they go to our doctor. If they go to their own doctor, the parent would be responsible for their cost. But there's many reasons why we may send somebody out. If there's a threat or a concern that somebody may harm themselves, suicide, threat, do we cover the cost? The answer was, if we do require a student to be examined based on a concern of suicide, that the board would cover the cost of the examination. But then she followed it up with, if they're taken by EMS to a hospital, that it changes. And I don't understand why that would change things. So that's really my question that I want them to answer. And then secondly,
I would say probably because if they're being taken by EMS, it's probably a medical emergency, and that's why it falls underneath health insurance. I would tend to think.
right, but then my next question is, under health insurance, if it's not fully covered, would we cover a balance? Because if we are, in my opinion, if we're covering it to go to a not go to the ER somewhere else, we cover it. Do we cover the balance when they send them to the ER? I don't know. I don't want to say. And in the policy, I couldn't find anything in reference to board's cost to this. So if their advice is board covers the cost, where is that written? Is it being arbitrary? Is it implied somewhere in the policy that I missed? So I need to dig into this a little deeper because quite frankly, for some time, I think we had it wrong. We were determining whether the board would pay based on whether the result coming back positive or not. If it was coming back positive,
For the drug
Right.
testing.
for the drug testing, if it was coming back positive, they were saying that the parent would cover the cost. If it was coming back negative, then we were covering the cost. That's wrong. It's discriminatory. So that's what started the conversation. But then Teresa did ask to dig in deeper when we send students out for other reasons. So more to come on this.
Have you gotten any insight from Nathaniel on this, or?
I didn't get to Nathaniel. No, I'm working with
Trying to
school
go.
board's policy provider.
Okay.
I'm hoping the woman I've been working with, Jean Harkness, can come, or another representative can come to your September work session, because they are ready to roll out the policies. But I want them to come here, do a presentation for you, show you how to access them, and roll it out properly. But at this time, they are done updating your policies. I just want them to give you access and explain to you how to go through them electronically.
Not to get off
Brett.
topic, but you just said updating the policies. Is there any change in verbiage?
Yes, you're gonna see changes.
So we're gonna have to basically
Review.
have first and second readings on a bunch of policies.
They're, and they can advise, and I asked that question, because I could go on and on and on. They're gonna advise, you do a first reading on them all, a second reading on them all, you migrate over, and then over time, correct. Because you can't, I don't, and that would be my advice, so that now you're in school board's program.
But we'll
Yes.
be approving policies that may not be, quotes, correct.
Correct
Right.
to what?
Well, you
Well,
said-
she spent many months taking our policies, looking at them. I mean, some of the policies are just very clear-cut, statute-driven. Other policies are our own thing, that we, like your random drug testing. So the ones that are rewritten to do the specific to Vernon, she and I have gone back and forth with those policies, and she's built them into their format. And you don't have to do a first reading and second reading right away. So maybe you do want to read them over for a couple months to maybe 3 months, and then we would have a first and second reading to institute their policy program, and then over time, we can revise as needed.
Or even if, is there any way that they can highlight for us
Yes.
areas that they're changing?
There's a summary, exactly, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, any verbiage that's changed, we can review to see, you know,
Yes.
if we feel it's a material change
Correct.
that's worth revisiting.
I think you touch upon your important ones first and then work your way on.
Yeah, see what's
Yes.
material, what's consequential.
I would, yes, and the answer is yes. I would just be concerned with working in two policy providers at the same time. I wouldn't want to approve school boards periodically while we're still in Strauss Esme with the others. Because every month, potentially, we could have updates to policy as statute changes.
Right.
And that's going to become messy.
But perhaps we could clean up the, any questions
course.
before we approve
Yes.
New Jersey school boards,
Correct.
rather than approve and then fix or adjust.
Right, and there's no rush in approving them, quite frankly, yes.
Yeah.
We kind of got off topic there.
Yeah, I was just gonna
That's
say,
sorry.
I was
No.
taking notes as fine as you guys were doing that. So, Mr. Kepnes, then, let's backtrack, because unfortunately, we've had many students who have been sent out for various things recently, whether it's being, tested for drugs, or possibly an acute issue, or possibly suicide watch, anything of that nature. If there's a group of parents that understandably you want to present the right answer, as do we, and they have bills that are due at a certain time, do we know what happens? Like, let's say their bills are due within the next month. What happens then for these parents who are waiting? Or we just don't know right now?
I don't have an answer. no.
Okay.
I will say, I'm not going to wait till September to discuss it with you to honor an obligation.
Okay.
So my goal is to get the answer as quickly as possible and square up or not based on the answer.
Now, Justin brought up a good point, asking Nathania, would that be helpful,
I
our
will reach out
attorney?
to Nathaniel. It's a
Okay.
good suggestion, yes.
Yeah, that might
Yes.
be to move it along. And also, if you could also, we have those bills, but then also, if you wouldn't mind just mentioning the insurance that's available if a student gets injured in sports, or let's say during school hours, so parents are aware of that too.
Oh. That's different.
Right, but it's separate, yeah.
So what's the question, though?
Moving away from a bill for, let's say, an 18A, but letting people know and the board know that we have the insurance
Oh,
if
yes.
anyone's injured in school, so that way
Correct. Thank
people
you.
are all just aware.
We have a dedicated accident policy, so meaning that if a student has an accident, they don't get sick, but they hurt themselves at school, that they would see the nurse. The nurse fills out a form, the top half of the form describing the injury, sends the claim form to the parents with instructions to fill out the second half of the form and any insurance information that they may have, and send it into Bollinger. Because with our dedicated accident insurance policy, they're insured when they have an accident at school. The first half of last year, we didn't have that. The only accident policy we had was related to sports. So if somebody was in their math class walking and tripped and hurt themselves, the parents' own insurance would have to cover that. It was very inexpensive to get an accident policy that blanketed the whole district. So we did that. So now, should someone have that accident in any class, in the hallway, in gym class, As long as they send in that claim form,
Right.
Bollinger would take care of that.
No, that's good. Thank you for being comprehensive.
Yes.
I just wanted, members on the board and the public to know
And
that.
that is important.
There's insurance in case their students or children get hurt in school.
Correct.
And then also on this other side, for medical bills, which unfortunately situations come up that,
Yes.
the risk assessment team or, whatever has to send a child out. And thank you for looking into that. What's,
And it's tough because
It is.
if we have a concern about a student, in the past, we have required them to see a doctor for their mental well-being before they come back. So now we're requiring them, so do we honor the bill? So I need a specific answer, even if it's at the ER.
Yeah,
I
because
don't know,
and
I don't
plus
understand
mental
why that
health is
might
such a
change.
gray
So
area.
I
in
need
people's-
to get that answer. I wasn't satisfied with, there's so many scenarios. I have to get that answer.
Okay, thank you for looking into it. I
Very good.
appreciate it.
So that was letter D. On,
Thanks, yeah.
okay, on to recommendations. Letter A is your financials, so it's recommended that the board approve the following financial reports.
Motion for 2A, please.
So moved.
Ms. McGee, second.
Second?
Mrs. Coughlin, questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Nunziata?
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri?
Yes.
Mrs. Conlon?
Yes.
Mrs. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Sparta?
Yes, but abstain on check as noted.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Letter B, it's recommended the board accept the report of the secretary and treasurer of school monies for the months of June and July.
Motion for 2B, please.
So moved.
Ms. McGee, second.
Second?
Ms. Coughlin, questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Bucieri?
Yes.
Mrs. Conlon?
Yes.
Mrs. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Nunziata?
Yes.
Mr. Sparta?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And your transportation following, it's recommended that the board approve the transportation as listed through the top of page 9.
Motion for 2C, please.
So moved.
Second?
You got that? Questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Conlon?
Yes.
Mrs. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Nunziata?
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri?
Yes.
Mr. Sparta?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Letter D, it's recommended that the board approve the contracts listed below.
Mo-
Go ahead, that's it.
Motion for 2D, please.
So moved.
Ms. McGee, second. Ms. Bucieri, questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mrs. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Nunziata?
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri?
Yes.
Mrs. Conlon?
Yes.
Mr. Sparta?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Letter E, it's recommended that the board approve chapters 192, 193 non-public services agreement with Ed Service Commission.
Motion for 2E, please.
So moved.
Ms. McGee, second.
Second?
Ms. Coughlin, questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mrs. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Nunziata?
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri?
Yes.
Mrs. Conlon?
Yes.
Mr. Sparta?
I guess I should abstain from that one.
Just because you're on the
Yep.
board. Yep.
Motion carries.
Very good. Letter F, it's recommended that the board approve the New Jersey Child Assault Prevention Program to take place at Cedar Mountain Primary School. Your responsibility would be $998.
Motion for 2F, please.
So moved.
Ms. McGee, second.
Second?
Ms. Coughlin, beat the bell. Questions or comments?
Who I've participated in this program as a parent.
Yep.
Is this a state-run program or is it an independent organization?
It's a county-wide program. I'm not sure it's a state program.
Mm-hmm.
And they have come into our schools in the past. There has been a scholarship or award. In other words, you're not paying the full freight of the program. And as a parent, you get to sit in, but the children sit in, and they usually talk with 3 counselors that talk about various issues that may affect the child. When I was a principal at Lounsbury, it was a very effective program. They came in, they spent the day with the children.
So do we only use this at Cedar Mountain, just for K-1?
This is, right now, we're using it at Cedar Mountain, yes.
I thought it was maybe in prior years, like you said, maybe in prior years we used it at the upper grades
Yes, and I'm
too.
not sure what the
limit is on what we can spend, et cetera, so I can look into that if you would like me to about the other
The
schools.
specific grades targeted.
Yeah, I
think
know
was
it
like
is. It's
third
younger
and
grades.
fourth, and then maybe sixth and seventh.
Yeah, but that would
It was like
include.
2 or 3 times throughout their whole school, like the kids had it.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether it might include Rolling Hills, but I'll check into that. And possibly something in Glen Meadow.
Yeah, maybe like 2nd grade, 4th grade, and 6th grade, something
Right.
like that. It was like 3
Right.
times.
And it's a program parents can opt their children out of also,
Yes,
if they're
yes,
not
it is.
comfortable
Well,
with
No.
the.
Because you do the parent information night ahead of time, right?
Mhm.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, so you go like a couple weeks before, you go to the parent information, and they
And Dottie
they
talks
tell
to
you what the
everybody.
program is.
Yep.
They'll
Mhm.
do it for you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Roll call vote.
Mrs. McGee,
Yes.
Mr. Annunziata?
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri?
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Sparta?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you. Letter G, it's recommended the board approve Chapter 226 Non-Public School Nursing Services Agreement, again between Sussex County Ed Service Commission.
Motion for 2G, please.
So moved?
Ms. McGee, second.
Second.
Ms. Coughlin, questions or comments?
Can you explain exactly what is going on with this?
Yes. Well asked. Letters E and G are similar. We receive an allocation from the state. It's like grant funding, but it's specific to these non-public categories. Letter E is specific to non-public services
Ed services, yeah.
with a non-public school within Vernon. So should there be, and it happens Field of Greens is your one non-public school in Vernon. So if there happens to be, from letter E, a student with special needs, special services needed at that non-public school, you just approved an agreement with Ed Service Commission, who will, send one of their people over to that school to service the student. They will bill us, and we will pay Ed Service with the funding given by the state.
Gotcha.
G is very similar, but a G is for nursing services. So ultimately, if they need an additional nurse to go over there for whatever purpose, would assume you approve this agreement. Ed Service Commission would send one of their people, one of their nurses over to service the child. They would bill us. We would pay Ed Service with that funding by the state. So this doesn't cost you a dime, quite frankly.
Good? Justin?
Yes.
Roll call vote.
Mr. Annunziata?
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri?
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Sparta?
Abstain.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Letter H on your addendum, last. It's recommended that the board approve the police department antenna location agreement between the Township of Vernon and the Vernon Township Board of Education, allowing for the antenna and ancillary equipment for radio communications to be housed at the high school.
Now this, okay.
No.
Good, I'll clarify.
Yeah, sorry, motion?
So moved?
Ms. McGee, Ms. Bucieri, second. Questions or comments?
This is a request from Dan Young.
Correct.
And Chief, and the idea simply is that we've had the antenna.
Correct.
And it really helps with their radio broadcasts throughout. So it's just an agreement between us. We've had this before, but it has to be renewed.
Yes, it's a repeater that's at the high school. Their two-way radio within the high school was bad. So in a situation where they had to come in and assist us, this now they have great reception within the high school. It keeps us safer and it helps them. And around the property of the high school, they have much better reception. It's their equipment. They're paying for the service, the monthly fee. Basically, they're just using the facility to house this.
One time, I know they used to have an issue with Lake Panorama and communication. Does it help over there too, or no?
That I don't know. I don't know how wide it goes,
Yeah.
honestly.
Have they tested communication at the other schools too?
Again, I don't know. I asked
Yes,
Scott.
they have, but that may not be related to the antenna. This was more of a concern about up there.
Right. Scott, I talked to Scott Wallach, who was instrumental in assisting with this, and he said it's for the high school and for reception. I don't know if they'll get all the way to another school, their two-way radio system, from this repeater, because this repeater can only broadcast and repeat the signal, and it's limited. Yeah, I don't know that it would repeat it over to Walnut Ridge, say.
I think from years ago, I remember just up in that area of Glenwood, the
That's
reception
what
up
it
there
is.
was horrible.
That's what it is.
Everything else was fairly good throughout the town, so.
Yeah, and everything else, our other schools are closer.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Mhm.
do we have any emergency backup for that?
Like
Generator?
power?
Yeah, I was gonna, like a generator?
Yeah.
I don't know. So if we lose power, do they lose that?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Mhm. That's a good question.
I'll ask.
I just know because there was an issue during one of the snowstorms
Sure. We were
that
out at the
they
high school.
lost their main communication up by Lake Conway, and their generator stopped working on them, and they had no communication at the town.
Oh.
So
They being whom?
the police
The police
department,
department?
all
Okay.
emergency services had no communication between the town and actually, Mr. Di Benedetto and I were over there talking to him about, because when we were questioning if we were going to be able to have school or not, if they would be able to,
Oh, I see.
what their recommendation was, and I know they lost the power up there, and then their generator went out on them, and they literally had no communication throughout the town for some time.
Let me stand out on a limb and say, the high school is all electric.
Mhm.
So we don't have enough generator power
Right.
to fire up that entire high school. I think you know that. But we do have a generator to power up some of the high school.
Right.
So if we can get this antenna on a circuit
fine.
that's tied to the generator, I think we can make that happen.
Okay.
Good.
Roll call vote.
Mr. Annunziata?
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri?
Yes.
Mrs. Conlon?
Yes.
Mrs. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Sparta?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Anything else, Mr. Kepnes?
That's all I have. Thank you.
Letter N, public participation, items on the agenda or any other business? Hearing none, close it to the public. What's not listed is open board member forum. Anybody have anything that they would like to share?
I recently drove by Rolling Hills and the fencing I saw was completed and I think it looks excellent. So good work to your team.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank Dr. McKay for going over to the camp this week,
Oh.
the sick kids, checking on them. That was
I
definitely
was told by
much
my wife to wash
appreciated.
my hands when I got
Yeah, I
home.
was gonna say, thank you for going and checking on our kids. That was, and following up with them, so thank you very much.
Well, you know, it's just a situation where the phone call came, and, you know, you're like, all right, well, what's it feel like up there? What's the deal? So I just went up, and the parents had all been called. Our folks from the coalition had done a great job. They were just waiting for the parents to come there. They had calmed everybody down. But sometimes when things like this happen, they worry about how the children are going to react. But we have wonderful kids. And again, some of the phone calls home last night were actually, because the contact number was the kid's cell phone. It's like, hi, how you doing? They were wonderful.
Good. Well, thank you for going and checking.
Yeah. One child actually called back this morning and thanked us. So, great kids. As we always say, we have wonderful children.
Anything else? Motion for adjournment?
So moved?
Ms. McGee, second?
Second?
Don't leave a second out there
Second.
for
Second,
adjournment.
I was just-
Ms. Bucieri, all in
I
favor?
beat you.
Aye, we are adjourned.